Jason Momoa. That's one of your comparables, right?
Yes.
He's been prominent since 1999. He was in Baywatch in 99. 44 episodes on Baywatch. Do you know that?
You can look it up if you did. I'll go with that.
Right. But you remember him on Baywatch.
Actually, didn't watch Baywatch, but
right.
He certainly had the physique for it. So,
Stargate, Atlantis, he was on that. Many episodes.
Right.
Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay. He played Conan the Barbarian.
In TV or film?
Film.
Okay. I don't have Mr. Momoa's resume memorized, so.
No, I'm just trying to understand how you came to the conclusion they're comparable, because I just want to spend a few minutes talking about Mr. Momoa's career. Game of Thrones was one of the most popular things on TV for a period of 3 years, correct?
Yes, he was.
And he was in Game of Thrones.
Yes, he was.
Yep. And he's Aquaman, right?
Yes, he is.
Right. He's the title character in Aquaman.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was actually Aquaman in a movie before the Aquaman movie started.
You mean the Justice League and other things like that, yeah.
Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. Wasn't he in that as Aquaman?
I didn't see that one.
Didn't see it.
No.
Miss Heard wasn't in that movie, was she?
Not that I know of, no.
No. And he was in both Justice League movies.
Correct.
Yeah. And he's in Aquaman 2.
Yes.
They used him in the second Lego movie. Right?
Yes.
He's one of the most heroic characters in the recent Dune blockbuster.
Which happened post-Aquaman.
Right. In fact, likely his character...
He's not the lead, though.
No.
In Dune, no, he's not the lead.
Did you ever read Dune?
Pardon?
Did you ever read Dune?
No, but I've seen the movie.
Okay. Do you understand whether his character will come back from the dead in the third movie?
As again, I didn't read the book, so he might. I don't know.
That
We're just talking about that one movie.
That might be a bit of a spoiler.
Oh, man. Dude.
He's one of the principal leads in the new Fast and Furious franchise movie Fast X, right?
I don't know that for sure, no.
Okay. But that's not the career path that Ms. Heard has had. She's never been the title character in a movie. She hasn't spent years on television. She did, 8 TV shows? 8 single episodes of TV?
Again, I don't have her resume. If you want to show it to me, we can count them together.
All right. Mr. Momoa remains well-liked, even though he's engaged in a recent divorce from another actor. That's correct, right?
I don't know. I don't follow his fan base.
You don't follow Jason Momoa, but you use him as a comparable to come up with a $45 million
I said I don't follow
deal?
his fan base. I understand him as a prominent actor in the business, but I don't follow his fan base.
Isn't fan base one of the things that you analyze?
Of course, you can look at numbers, but I don't keep a watch on his social media feeds.
All right. All right. You indicated that Gal Gadot is in Wonder Woman.
Yes, she's a star.
She's in fact Wonder Woman.
Yeah, no, she's good too.
Yep. All right. She's the title character, and there's been now multiple Wonder Woman movies, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And even before that, she was in franchise films.
Which one are you referring to?
Fast and Furious.
Excuse me, I honestly don't remember her being that as one of the main characters. I know it's The Rock and that
You
whole crew.
didn't even know she was in the Fast and Furious franchise.
I've seen it on her resume, but I didn't. I'm not a fan of the Fast and Furious.
All right. You'll agree with me that Wonder Woman is a more prominent role than Mira?
If you're going to talk about apples to apples in that exact movie, yes.
Right. What about, does Mira have any, self-titled franchise films?
Not yet.
No. And Ms. Gadot played a much bigger role in the movie they were in together, the Justice League movie.
In what movie they were in together? Oh, in Justice League?
Yeah.
I haven't counted the screen time, so I can't really say.
Okay. You indicated that another person that you compared Ms. Heard with is Zendaya.
Zendaya, yeah.
Person so famous she goes by one name.
I guess when you have a name that's a Z, it works, I guess.
All right. She's been on the Disney Channel since she's 13 years old.
Right.
Right? She's won an Emmy.
Yes, she did.
Right. She was singing and dancing and swimming from trapezes in The Greatest Showman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. She's now been in multiple Spider-Man movies.
Yes.
She's 10 years younger than your client.
Right.
Yeah. But this is a person that you deemed incomparable.
Well, as I was explaining to you how I chose them, when you look at superhero characters, there's not that many to pull from. So I worked on pulling characters that were in superhero movies that were about the same age range within 10 years, as you've noted to me, thank you. And also just where her career would have gone. I said that they were comparable. They're not identical. So you can just look at what their career has done either before that superhero movie, then in others, or the one they were in, and then you look at where her career should have gone. Even though she may not have been at the stature of a Zendaya at that time, you can still look at it as a comparable trajectory of what happens when you're in a blockbuster movie. It's just a reference point. It's not meant to be identical. They're not meant to be the same people, or not even have the exact same career. It's meant to be a reference point. Simple as that.
So far, everybody we've looked at have been in more blockbuster movies than Ms. Heard.
But Ms. Heard was also in the biggest blockbuster movie, and the light that shines on Jason Momoa will also shine on her. So you have to look at it in context of the biggest movie that DC
in the
Comics
DC
is,
universe.
and also one of the biggest box office films ever, probably within the top 10, because I've looked at it, right? So that light was going to shine brighter on her than someone who wasn't in that movie. And again, it would have just helped her in her career move forward, not stalled it and her world be silent afterwards.
For the jury to accept your damage analysis, they would have to agree with you that Ms. Heard was on the precipice of a meteoric rise. That's the word you used, right?
Actually, no, I didn't. I did use meteoric with someone like, let's say, Gal Gadot or Zendaya, but I actually gave you a range and gave the jury a range that they weren't all going to have a meteoric rise. Some of them would be smaller, right? And so what the numbers that I gave you do not represent a meteoric rise. A meteoric rise is when Jason Momoa goes from, I don't know, 4 million, 5 million to a $50 million payday. That's a meteoric shift in our business. But when someone has contracts that actually go from 1 million to the first one, 2 million, and then 4 million, that is standard for a franchise that is perceived to do well. And so I based those calculations on very specific numbers that were already contracted. I wanted to stay within reality and look at the numbers that were already contracted for Ms. Heard and just move out forward on one film a year, maybe a TV show here or there, and some endorsement contracts, which is very typical for an actor in our business to make that kind of money. It just is what happens.
So the example you just used is somebody went from 1 million to 2 million to 4 million. Your client has never had a contract that exceeds $2 million, correct?
Incorrect.
All right.
In the Aquaman, it's actually the Justice League contract because they're associated. So Justice League, Aquaman, she was paid $1 million. Then in Aquaman 2, it was written that she was going to earn $2 million. And if there's another one, it was written in the terms that she would get $4 million. So it actually was a contract that Ms. Heard signed with the studio.
Right, but the movie hasn't been made.
Aquaman 2 hasn't even come out yet, so the
Right.
third one is still on deck, as they say.
Yeah. Okay, let's put it differently. Your client's never been paid $2 million for a movie she appeared in.
She was paid $2 million for Aquaman.
Right.
Aquaman 2.
And she's never been paid $4 million.
She was contracted to be paid, and when the movie goes, that's what she will be paid. So that's what I said. She was
If
on
she's
the
in the movie.
Right, but if Aquaman 2 does even nearly as well as Aquaman 1, there's going to most likely be a third one. So we can look at that as a precedent that was set in writing, actually.
If a movie makes $795 million, you think there's likely to be a next one?
If it was the first or the second one, but if it's the fifth in the series, I assume that you're referring to Pirates 5. It performed well at the box office, yes, but certainly not in comparison to some of the other ones. And that's what a studio like Disney will look at to say, has that franchise had its run? Or do we need to change it? A
studio like Disney wants to walk away from an $800 million payday?
Well, an $800 million payday has to be put into context to the budget that it costs to get that movie and then the marketing thereafter. And with the increasing costs in not only Mr. Depp's fee or any of the, and plus the other actors' fees, plus general production costs that are getting more expensive, then you put in the marketing costs, which are sometimes 1, 2, or 3 times the budget of the film. A film like that, a studio can spend $600-800 million just making and marketing the film. So $795 million is a lot of money, and it seems like a really good box office, but you have to put into perspective of what's spent on production, marketing, and the overhead costs that the studio takes. So you have, again, it's all in context of what the budget of the film and the marketing of the film is.
All right, let's put some more things in context. Ana de Armas, that's another one you used.
Yes.
All right. She's most recently, I guess, in Deep Water with Ben Affleck.
I don't, again, I know some of the movies that she's been in. I don't remember about Deep Water. I don't even know if that's out yet,
okay,
to be honest.
She was in the last James Bond movie.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. They were talking about making her the next female Bond, right?
Right, after her big Stars Born moment, yeah, she's gotten a lot more big roles, which is what we had hoped for Miss Heard.
Yeah. And you said that her breakout role was Blade Runner?
It was like the first big, studio movie that got a lot of attention. I believe that was the one that we can look at as a marker for her, sure.
Did you watch Blade Runner 2049?
I did.
Do you know what she did in the movie?
It was years ago. I don't remember exactly what she was in, what role she played, but she was in that movie, and from that, her agents used that as leverage to get her more movies.
You have no knowledge that her principal role in that movie was as a gigantic naked billboard?
Are you saying that's the only thing she was? She was a gigantic naked billboard. She wasn't in the movie.
That's the principal role in that movie.
I don't remember the movie well enough to know.
Okay. And did you know that she was? I talked a little bit about Ben Affleck, right?
Right.
He's an interesting example because he's been in a role that's been recast multiple times. You know that role?
Are we talking about Batman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Batman.
Sure.
All right. So the title character in that DC series has seen how many actors?
Several.
Right. Michael Keaton.
He was Batman.
Val Kilmer.
You're a movie buff, yeah.
Yeah. Christian Bale was Batman.
I think he was, you're right.
George Clooney was Batman.
Definitely.
Yeah. I guess Robert Pattinson is now Batman.
Don't know.
Okay. But you're taking an absolutely iconic role that the DC universe has recast 4, 5, 6 times, correct?
Correct.
So that just because you have the role in the first movie or the second movie doesn't mean you get it in the third movie or the fourth movie.
Unless it's contractual.
Right. Unless it's contractual. So, now, let's look. Ana de Armas, She's like the new Marilyn Monroe on Netflix too, right?
I believe so. She was also in Knives Out, which is probably even a bigger breakout role for her. But
Right.
again, I chose Blade Runner because it's a similar thing. You have to start somewhere. But Knives Out probably was her big moment in time.
Yeah. All right. The other person you picked was Chris Pine. Chris Pine is in a superhero movie, Wonder Woman.
He is in Wonder Woman. He's also, well, Star Trek being a blockbuster, but not necessarily a superhero, right?
Yeah. He was in both Wonder Woman movies, right?
Yes, he plays the love interest to Gal Gadot, yeah.
Yeah. On Star Trek, in the Star Trek franchise, he plays Captain Kirk, right?
I don't remember exact role that he played. I didn't see it in the movie. I just know it from his resume, to be honest.
Do you know who Captain Kirk is?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Well,
But you didn't know that Chris Pine is Captain Kirk in Star Trek?
I hate to say I'm not a Star Trek fan.
Okay. But you used Mr. Pine as an example, irrespective of the fact you didn't even know he starred in this franchise film?
I did know that he starred. That's why I used it. Again,
in fact, he was the most prominent person in the movie.
we can go over this a couple more times, and I'm happy to do so. All I wanted to do was look at, from a small pool of people that have been in huge franchise movies or superhero movies, and give you a sense of what the range is or what someone's trajectory can be. Again, they are not apples and apples. They're not both green apples or both red apples. I just was looking at a range. It's what we do. It's what we do in the industry. It's what you do to kind of get a sense of how much you're going to pay an actor, what they're worth in the foreign markets and the domestic markets.
I think my question was, did you know whether he was in Star Trek?
Yes, and you were asking me why I chose him, which is what this conversation is about. And again, I chose him because he was part of Star Trek and Wonder Woman, but mostly because he was in Wonder Woman. And I don't know the exact time frame of which came first, but the fact that he's in both of them is consistent with what actors of this ilk tend to do once they're in a movie like this.
But you talk about breakout roles, but you don't know which was his breakout role.
Chris Pine's been an actor. He's been a well-liked actor. He was in both Star Trek and in Wonder Woman. And
Did a
Star
movie
Trek,
with Denzel Washington?
Pardon?
Did a movie with Denzel Washington?
He's had a good career.
Yeah, great career.
Yeah.
Yeah, much longer career than Ms. Heard, right?
She was on the precipice of a great career.
Yeah.
She hasn't had the chance to negotiate for that yet or be in those movies yet, so we don't know yet.
We're getting back to precipice. Didn't you just deny precipice a few minutes ago? I thought your testimony was she was on the precipice of meteoric rise. You said, I guess.
I didn't say meteoric. I said consistent. I don't know. She could have a meteoric rise, but I was talking about consistent with Ms. Heard.
All right. So of the actors you selected, two of them are the title characters in their DC movies. One
is Aquaman. Who's the other title character?
Gal Gadot.
Wonder Woman, right.
Right.
She's Wonder Woman. And you mean Jason Momoa, sure. Yeah.
So you get two title characters. You got James Kirk. And those are the people that you thought were most representative of Ms. Heard.
Again, there are not that many in the pool to pick from. I'm not going to put comparable actors that haven't been in either large, what we call tentpole movies, or franchise movies, or superhero movies. So I wanted to work within those parameters, and that's what I did. So those are the actors I chose, yes. And to show what type of work happens when you're in a big movie and what happens afterwards.
When you say comparable, every one of the actors you chose had a much longer TV career than Ms. Heard.
Again, they were all in superhero or franchise movies that did very, very well at the box office.
And there are tons of actors and actresses who are in superhero movies that don't have meteoric rises thereafter, correct?
Not when they're the lead character with Jason Momoa, but to your point, there are many actors that have no career prior to a breakout role and then have a meteoric career and have had no career prior. So you don't always just look at the past. It's helpful. And with Ms. Heard, she had good reviews, so that's what I looked at. But if you look at other actors and they have their first role and all of a sudden they become a superstar from one role. So that happens in our business. It just does.
All right. With respect to your comparable actors, you have no personal knowledge as to how much any of them were compensated over the period you reviewed.
Incorrect.
You have personal knowledge as to who?
Jason Momoa.
And you derive that personal knowledge from talking to somebody?
Yes.
He didn't tell you.
His agent did.
Okay. So what you will rely on what Mr. Momoa's agent told you, but you have no knowledge. You didn't see the contract.
No, his agent is at William Morris as well, so they told me that.
Right. And you've never seen anybody else's contracts as to what they were making.
No, but in 25 years of being in this business, I understand the basis of which actors are paid when they're in blockbuster films and then they're in large budgeted studio films. So it's not a leap to kind of understand where the actor's making. And again, I really didn't want to try to be speculative in my analysis. I wanted to work with the numbers that Amber had contracted for already and just take it from there and said if she had done one movie a year and one series and done product endorsement, that's how I got to the number. So I wasn't looking to take her on a meteoric rise. I wasn't looking to give her the same career as Jason Momoa. I took her numbers that her agents had actually negotiated and worked from there.
When you say you weren't trying to give her the same career as Jason Momoa, the TV program that she most recently did, The Stand, she made $200,000 an episode. That's what you testified to.
Correct.
And in your damage analysis, you give her $1 million an episode had the Waldman statements not occurred. And you do it only because you believe Mr. Momoa has gotten that in something that he's in.
Right.
So you are giving her the same career as Jason Momoa.
Well, again, with someone like Ms. Heard, who was in a blockbuster film with the team at William Morris, in my discussions with William Morris, that's what they were looking to negotiate for her on other projects. So I got some of that information from her management team directly.
So her agents were looking to get her as much money as possible?
I think that's the job of an agent. They usually try to get the most money as possible.
Your testimony is they were looking to get the money for her, but you need somebody willing to pay on the other side of that deal, don't you?
Right, but agents are working with people in the industry and have a pulse on have a finger on a pulse of what's going on, so they know who's marketable and what the prices that all the streamers are paying these days.
You haven't seen a single one of the endorsement contracts that you referenced, other than Ms. Heard's?
No, other than, again, what I was talking to William Morris in terms of the pricing that they are aware of, not only for their own clients, but what's out in the marketplace, and it's pretty consistent. And I've also worked with other actors on other cases that have gotten similar contracts, so I'm familiar with the rates of endorsement contracts.
You haven't made any reference to the actual earnings of any of these actors.
Again, as you do an analysis, you put together the numbers that you know from both your experience and the marketplace and the agents that are working in the marketplace. So together, that's how I created those numbers, and mostly using Ms. Heard's numbers specifically and giving her a very steady career, which is what she had had prior to Aquaman.
Yeah, and you don't have the prior earnings of any of the actors you looked at other than Ms. Heard's.
No, I don't have all the contracts now.
You don't have any of that information.
I'm sorry?
You don't have any of that information?
No.
Okay. In fact, that information, I guess aside from Mr. Momoa's, is confidential, right?
Usually it is, yes.
Yeah. And the only reason you know anything about Mr. Momoa is that Ms. Heard shares an agent? Or an
right,
agency.
but I've also been in the industry for many years, and I know what actors get paid. I talk about budgets constantly, so it's not a secret within the industry the amount that actors in those types of movies are paid very, very well.
You're not currently working as an agent for anyone, are you?
No.
All right. So, the salaries of these comparable actors Did they form some basis for your opinion?
No.
Okay. So your opinion, as I understand it, is that Ms. Heard should have been able to renegotiate an existing contract.
Which is standard in the industry as well as with her agent specifically.
Do you know if it's standard with Warner Brothers?
I'm sorry?
Do you know if it's standard with Warner Brothers?
I don't know if it's standard at any of the studios, but it is standard for agents to renegotiate, and oftentimes are successful when the film is done so well.
Right, but what you're talking about is there's an existing contract where Ms. Heard has made a promise that she will do the next movie for, in this instance, $2 million, right?
Right.
And what the agent is trying to do is to get Warner Brothers to say, hey, you should pay her more than your contract says because you like her?
Well, as Ms. Kovacevic said, also, it's standard in the industry. As again, I've been in the industry, I've worked with agents, and I've worked with lots of lawyers, and we have conversations about what is an actor getting, or what can they do, or what are they going to do the next time. So again, it's a standard in practice in the industry, especially when a film is as successful as Aquaman, that the agents will go back and renegotiate. In fact, that was conversation.
Isn't the standard practice is that they would try to renegotiate, but it's up to the studio?
Sure, but oftentimes in a movie of such of the nature of Aquaman, they're very successful, usually.
But the entirety of your analysis assumes a renegotiation with a studio for terms that are double what the studio had already got a promise from Ms. Heard she would work for.
Correct.
All right. Have you talked to Walter Hamada?
Have I spoken to him?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Who is he?
He's a senior executive at Warner Brothers, or yeah, I think he still is there, but certainly at the time of the renegotiation, he was a senior executive.
And do you know whether he's the president of DC-based film productions?
I think that's exactly his title, yeah.
Yeah. Who's in a better position to determine whether Warner Brothers would renegotiate, you or Mr. Hamada?
As again, I based this on the agents that were talking to Warner Brothers about Mr. Momoa, and they were wanting to talk to them about Ms. Heard as well.
Okay, I'm not
So
sure.
I based my information on them. So the connection should be Mr. Hamada or the agents, not Mr. Hamada and me.
All right. Who's in a better position to know whether Warner Brothers would renegotiate?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Just asking.
I'll sustain the objection. Next
Sorry.
question.
Do you review any testimony from Mr. Hamada?
I did.
Did you understand that Mr. Hamada says that they want to hold the lawyers, hold the actors to their deals?
That was a philosophy that he said Warner Brothers had, yes.
Yeah. Did you understand that Mr. Hamada said that nothing Mr. Depp did impacted her compensation?
I don't remember that part of the testimony. Do you have it available for me to read?
You don't know whether Mr. Hamada testified. Did anything Mr. Depp said about Amber Heard affect her compensation?
Again, I don't
remember? That's okay.
I don't recall that testimony.
Sorry.
No.
Do you know whether Mr. Hamada indicated whether he even knew who Adam Waldman was?
Again, I don't remember the conversation about Hamada and Waldman or Depp.
And you don't remember whether Mr. Hamada made any statements as to whether anything Mr. Waldman said affected Ms. Heard's compensation.
In my experience, studios don't talk about how or why they make decisions based on publicity or conversations. They're not going to try. They're going to be very protective of all their relationships. So that's just natural.
Yeah, unless you can get them to testify under oath at a deposition, right?
Well, even so, they're not going to say anything negative. They may bypass it by being positive, but they're not going to do anything that could potentially damage a relationship that may change or be worthwhile in the future. So that's just what a studio person does.
Mr. Hamada is in the best position to determine whether there were chemistry issues with Ms. Heard.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
He's the president of the company.
Overruled.
I don't know how involved Mr. Hamada was on a daily basis in terms of chemistry, but I do know that Warner Brothers did a chemistry test with Ms. Heard and Mr. Momoa before she even got the role. She went in and did what they call a chemistry test. So that was to actually see whether there was good chemistry between them. And evidently there was good chemistry because she was then hired to be the romantic interest. So whatever Mr. Hamada said during his deposition, I look at what actually happened in real life, which is she got the chemistry test and then she got the job.
Yeah, let's look what happened in real life. She went in before and took the test. Then she made a movie. Then there was an existing movie under which Warner Brothers could then decide whether there was chemistry, right?
The movie worked. It made over $1 billion, and they're all over the poster. If they didn't think that there was chemistry, they wouldn't have put Ms. Heard on the poster next to Mr. Momoa. So,
you know there were multiple posters for the Aquaman movie.
yes,
And that
there always are. That's standard.
And that 3 out of the 4 posters, the standard posters for Aquaman, didn't even feature Ms. Heard.
Right. So when you make a poster at the studio, it's normal to have 3 or 4 variations because you want to appeal to different people's perspectives. So you want the romantic poster, you want the action poster, you want the superhero poster. So it's normal for them to have many posters, but the romantic poster was of Ms. Heard and Mr. Momoa.
Right. And everyone, and all the others are just of Mr. Momoa.
Like we talked about, it's Aquaman, but she was prominent in the ones that Warner Brothers wanted to appeal to women and to the romantic interest of the consumer.
Right. What movies would Ms. Heard have gotten absent Mr. Waldman's statements?
Well, the ones we know about specifically that she was in conversations with was a movie with Gail Garcelle Bernal, I believe that's how you say his name, at Amazon, which is what Ms. Kovacevic said. And she was also in consideration for a movie called Ambulance with Michael Bay. But again, after the Waldman statements, nobody would talk to the agents, and so they weren't able to garner more. Oh, she also had a movie that she was interested in producing that a good friend of hers, or a friend of hers or colleague was doing. So there was at least those 3 that I read about.
Those were 3 movies that she was being considered for, but you don't know what movie she was going to be in.
Well, again, they stopped the conversation after the statement, so we don't know where they would have gone, of course. But she was in consideration for all of them, and given her fame from Aquaman, that would have helped all those movies. So it would have made a lot of sense.
You're projecting movies way out into the future that you have no knowledge would ever have gotten made.
Well, that's what we do when you talk about comparables and economic damages. You talk about the future. That's standard in our industry as a forensic expert and in the industry. That's how movies are financed, as a matter of fact, is by forecasting what happens in the future.
What connection do you draw between Mr. Waldman's statements and the reported reduction in Ms. Heard's Aquaman 2 role?
Again, it's the timing of it all. It's the timing of it all. And also, they were going to take her out of the movie after the statements, and then they put her back in. And then can I talk about the emails that I read? I'm not sure at this point, but.
So when you say they were going to take her out of the movie, when you have an option, you literally have the option whether to include the actress, right? That's what it means.
Correct.
Right. So they can choose to exercise the option or not exercise the option. Entirely up to them.
Correct.
And they have that particular studio, to your knowledge, has repeatedly recast even major figures in their DC movies.
We talked about Batman.
What about Superman?
You know, I'm not. I think I'm more familiar with the Batman actors. I think there have been a couple actors of Superman, but depending on how the movie performed, if a movie doesn't perform, they'll look for other actors. Or if they want to go a different direction or reboot a franchise, they will look at different actors. So if the movie's successful, they're not likely to change the actors, especially not in the second one or the third one.
Another reason they'll look for a different actor or actress, if the actor or actress is charged or asking too much money to play the role again, correct?
Yes, not in figures under $10 million, but yes.
Yeah. If you're asking for too much money, you might not get your role again. And your analysis assumes that Ms. Heard could double her money.
Well, her contracts doubled her money from each one to the next, so it wasn't that large a leap to do that, especially when the agents had told me that that was what had been they were considering and what they'd been discussing.
All right. You seen the script of Aquaman 2?
Personally,
Yeah.
I did see a draft. I don't know what the date was or when it was or where in the succession of the rewrites it was. I did see one draft, yes.
You don't know what Warner Brothers has in mind for that movie in terms of the kind of movie it's going to be?
It's a superhero movie.
Right. It's supposed to be like a buddy comedy, right?
I don't know. I don't know about a buddy comedy. It's an action movie, superhero movie. I don't know.
Who's Patrick Wilson?
Patrick Wilson. I've heard that name in terms of an actor, but I don't know Mr. Wilson.
All right. Do you know if he appears in Aquaman?
Again, I don't know him by name. If you want to show me a picture, I can, or a clip from the movie.
All right. Do you know if Mr. Wilson appears more frequently in Aquaman than your client does?
I didn't count the screen time when I watched the movie. It was a long, even when I watched it again, I didn't count the screen time of anybody else.
Did you read the testimony of Mr. Hamada?
We discussed that, yes.
You disregarded all of it in your analysis as to her ability to renegotiate, correct?
Well, I remember the part where Mr. Hamada said that from time to time they will break their philosophy and renegotiate. It's what they did with Jason Momoa and with Gal Gadot. So, it coincides with what we know in the industry, which is it can be done.
It's what they did with the two title characters in the DC universe.
Again, I've worked in the business for a long time, and I've seen a lot of actors renegotiate their careers. I'm sorry, not their careers. Renegotiate their fees. It's common practice, and it's certainly what the agent will think about first when a movie makes $1 billion+ dollars.
Right. Again, focused on the agent, but it's the studio that pays the bills.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right. Your Honor, I have a fair amount more to do.
Continue.
I'm sorry?
Continue.
Okay. I didn't know if we were going to 5:30 today or not.
Every day is 5:30 day.
Okay. We may not even need to get there.